This whole situation is exactly what the title says, and honestly, I still can't believe it happened to me. We work at the same office. Her desk is directly across from mine, and we're both married. Recently, we've been talking more, but it was nothing unusual or inappropriate. I've always been friendly with pretty much everyone at work except for Carl, and seriously, fuck you, Carl, and your credit-stealing habits, but that's a different story. Our conversations were completely harmless. You know, the usual office small talk. How was your weekend? Check out this funny video. What do you think about this new policy? That kind of thing. Just normal coworker interaction that I have with half the people in the building. Then she started texting me outside of work hours. She told me she was surprised by how easy it was to talk to me and how much she enjoyed our conversations, how naturally they flowed. I replied something casual like, yeah, cool, me too, you're nice to talk to. I didn't think anything of it. I have plenty of female friends, so this wasn't uncommon territory for me. I thought we were just becoming work friends. Last week, I left my car at the auto repair shop because the brakes had started making this weird grinding noise that couldn't be ignored any longer. Since she lives just 2 blocks away from my house, I asked if she could give me a ride home. She said yes immediately, no hesitation, so I figured it was no big deal. We're sitting in traffic on the way to my place talking about regular stuff, work gossip, weekend plans, nothing heavy. Then she circles back to the topic of our conversations again, talking about how nice they've been. I agreed because, honestly, they had been pleasant. Again, I have plenty of female friends, so this kind of conversation wasn't setting off any alarm bells for me yet. Then she starts going on about how interesting it is that we have different opinions on certain things, but still get along so well. I'm nodding along, giving her the standard, yeah, sure, that's what makes good friendships type of response, not really reading into it. That's when everything went completely sideways. She suddenly says she started looking at me differently, that she's attracted to me, and then she puts her hand on my thigh, just reaches over and places it there while we're stopped at a red light. My brain short-circuited for a second. I processed what was happening, moved her hand off my leg, and tried to handle it as diplomatically as possible. I thanked her for the compliment and told her she was nice and good-looking too, but that we were just colleagues. We're both married. I respected her, but I wasn't interested, and nothing was going to happen between us. Period. The rest of that car ride was the most awkward silence I've ever experienced. You could have cut the tension with a knife. When she finally dropped me off at my house, I thanked her for the ride and got out as quickly as possible, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. When I got inside, my phone started blowing up with text messages from her. She was going on and on about how well we get along, how she feels this connection between us, how she's not in the best place in her marriage right now. Then I started getting a flood of Instagram notifications. She was mass-liking every single photo on my profile, going back months, maybe even years. It was obsessive and honestly kind of scary. I replied to her texts, trying really hard not to be rude or cruel, suggesting that maybe she should use her energy and time to work on resolving whatever problems she was having at home, instead of whatever this was. At this point, I was starting to think she might be genuinely unstable, and the best way to avoid any major problems was just to dismiss the crazy behavior, keep things cool and distant, and let it fizzle out naturally. After all, we worked together in a relatively small company of about 55 people. I didn't want to create unnecessary drama or make things uncomfortable for everyone. But she wouldn't let it go. She kept texting, insisting it wasn't just physical attraction. She said she was jealous and couldn't stand seeing my wife's posts on Instagram with me. That's when the red alerts started going off in my head like sirens. This wasn't just a harmless crush or a moment of weakness. This was becoming a serious problem. Then she asked if we could meet after work or during lunch break somewhere outside the office to talk about things, just the two of us, to discuss our feelings or whatever she thought was happening between us. I hadn't told any of this to my wife yet. I'd been planning not to because she was already dealing with so much stress from her job and some ongoing problems with her parents. I didn't want to add more weight to her shoulders when she was already struggling. But I was starting to realize that keeping this from her might be a mistake. So I came to Reddit, to the almighty and all-knowing collective wisdom of the internet, looking for advice on how to handle this situation. I needed to know how to avoid this woman getting even crazier and potentially causing problems at work or in my marriage. I wanted to know if I should tell my wife what was happening or just deal with this myself. And I needed strategies for making this woman understand that I wasn't interested without blowing up my work environment. My plan at that point was simple. Let her know again, firmly, that I wasn't interested, play it cool, dismiss what she was saying, and slowly decrease the number of interactions we had until everything faded back into normal coworker territory. Distance and time would fix it, right? The top comment came from a user who was blunt and direct. He told me I needed to tell 2 people immediately, my wife and human resources. He said I should show them the texts, including the ones where I clearly requested that she stop contacting me and hitting on me. He explained that I needed to get ahead of this story because it could easily spiral out of control, and I needed to trust my wife to handle the information. Then he told me to stop talking to this coworker about anything that wasn't directly work-related. That comment hit me like a bucket of cold water. I've been trying to handle this quietly, trying not to make waves, but he was right. This could explode in my face if I didn't take action.
Update 1. I'm sorry it took me 2 weeks to post an update, but I wanted to make sure everything had actually settled down before I came back here. First of all, thank you for all the advice. Since this was the first time something like this had happened to me in such a blunt, aggressive way, I was trying to handle it the best I could, but I felt completely lost about what to do. Your advice really helped me think clearly when my judgment was clouded by the weirdness of the situation. Following the advice I got, I went home that evening and asked my wife to sit down with me. I told her everything that was going on. I showed her all the messages, explained the car ride incident in detail, showed her the Instagram notifications, all of it. I laid it all out there and waited for her reaction. She was really concerned, but she didn't get mad at me or accuse me of anything. She was just worried that, using her exact words, that bitch would ruin your career and stress you out. Her immediate instinct was to protect me, which honestly made me love her even more. I told her I planned to talk to my boss and HR the next day, and she agreed that was the right move. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I scheduled a meeting with HR and my boss together. When I told my boss I wanted to meet with him and HR at the same time, he went pale. He later told me he thought I was about to quit, which actually made me laugh despite the stress I was under. I sat down with both of them, took a deep breath, and told them to prepare themselves for what was basically a Mexican soap opera. Then I showed them all the messages and explained everything that had happened, from the first texts to the car ride incident to the mass Instagram liking to her request to meet outside the office. I told them I wanted her moved to another desk and that I trusted them to discipline her appropriately so she would stop harassing me. I tried to stay calm and professional, sticking to the facts and not letting emotion color my account of events. They listened very quietly, nodding occasionally and asking quick clarifying questions when they needed more information. Their faces remained neutral, which I appreciated. They weren't dismissing me or minimizing what happened. After I finished my story, they told me they would call her in to discuss the matter and that I could rest assured they would take all reasonable measures to address the situation. I thanked them and went back to my desk to try to get some work done. I had a business trip to Mexico City coming up the following week, so I was already pretty busy and stressed. About an hour later, I heard the phone ring at the desk of my batshit crazy coworker. I'm just going to call her BSCC from now on because it's easier. She looked over at me with suspicious eyes when she stood up and headed toward the HR office. I tried my best to avoid eye contact and kept my expression completely neutral, like I was just focused on my work. An hour after that, she came back to her desk crying. She grabbed her purse and left the office without saying a word to anyone. Everybody in the office was completely confused, whispering to each other like, "What the hell just happened?" Nobody knew what was going on, and I wasn't about to explain it to them. My boss called me into his office shortly after and told me what had happened in that meeting. They told her that I had reported what was going on. According to my boss, she immediately launched into a whole dramatic performance, telling them she was in love with me and was just fighting for what she thought was right, and that she couldn't help her feelings, that it was destiny or fate or some other nonsense. She apparently tried to make it sound romantic and justified. My boss and the HR representative dismissed her arguments completely. They told her she needed to keep things professional and move to another desk immediately, or they would have to terminate her employment.
They gave her a clear choice: stay professional and keep your job, or continue this harassment and lose everything. And she chose to get fired. She actually preferred to lose her job rather than stop pursuing me or accept that I wasn't interested. She walked out of that office, grabbed her stuff, and left the company. Just like that, she was gone.
Update 2. It had been 2 weeks since then when I posted my update, and nothing related to the subject that happened. My life was back the way I liked it, peaceful and quiet. No drama, no uncomfortable encounters, no weird text messages at odd hours. I wanted to thank everyone again for the advice. My thoughts had been kind of clouded by the situation, and the Reddit community had helped me think clearly about what I needed to do. Sometimes you need outside perspective to see what's right in front of you. But there were some comments on my update that made me realize I might not be completely out of the woods yet. People were warning me that she knew where I lived and was no longer constrained by the fear of losing her job. They told me to keep a sharp eye out and not hesitate to call the police if she showed up at my house. One commenter pointed out that her behavior in that HR meeting, making a dramatic scene and insisting she was fighting for what was right, suggested she might be mentally ill and completely detached from reality. That was genuinely unhinged behavior, and I needed to take it seriously. Other commenters suggested I should get something in writing from my boss and HR about what happened for documentation purposes in case I needed it with the authorities later. They also recommended I write out my own quick log of everything that happened while it was still fresh in my mind and look into what my legal options might be, just in case things escalated. I know it sounds like overkill, but they were right. I had been a little naive, thinking this would just stop now that she was fired. Following those comments, I wrote detailed logs of everything, made backups of all the messages, and requested a formal letter from HR explaining what had happened and why she'd been terminated. I even considered going to the police station to get everything registered in case anything happened later, though I ultimately decided that with all the other measures I'd taken, it probably wasn't necessary yet. But I kept it in mind as an option if things got worse. One commenter jokingly asked if she had always been this crazy, or if I was just so good-looking and charming that I'd driven her insane because she couldn't have me. I have to admit, those comments made me feel embarrassed. I'm not that self-aware, and I definitely don't think of myself as some irresistible heartthrob. I'd been working with her for 2 years, and we'd never talked much before this happened, so I couldn't claim anything for sure about her mental state before all this drama. She'd never let any craziness show up until it suddenly all exploded at once. One person speculated that maybe she had been having a bipolar or manic episode, which would explain why it took her 2 years to fixate on me and then escalated so quickly once she'd set her sights on me. But honestly, I'm also known for not being very perceptive, and I'd never paid much attention to her before, so it's possible there were signs I completely missed. Then, something happened that I needed to share. I got a call from her husband. Apparently, she had been crying all weekend after getting fired, and on Monday she finally told him why she had lost her job. But he told me he didn't buy her version of the facts, because she'd contradicted herself in several points of her story. Something about what she was saying didn't add up, and he knew his wife well enough to recognize when she was lying or leaving things out. He'd told her to call the company to clarify what really happened, and now he was calling me directly to make sure he had the truth. He sounded hurt but very clear-minded, like a man who'd been through something difficult before and knew how to handle himself. I told him everything that had happened and offered to show him the messages in person. We agreed to meet in an hour at a coffee shop next to my office. I immediately informed my boss, HR, and my wife that I was going to meet with him, and my boss actually offered to come with me for support and as a witness. I'm telling you, I'm surrounded by genuinely good people. I arrived at the coffee shop with my boss, and her husband was already waiting for us. The meeting was actually very quick and straightforward. I showed him all the messages on my phone, answered his questions about what had happened, and that was pretty much it. He said he just wanted to be sure about what really went down because she deleted all of her messages from her phone, which obviously made him suspicious. Then he dropped a bombshell. He said this wasn't the first time something like this had happened.
She'd apparently had similar obsessive episodes before. He mentioned that she'd been seeing a psychologist in the past to deal with these issues, but she'd stopped going to therapy recently. And that explained a lot, actually. It sounded like she had some genuine mental health problems that weren't being treated, and I'd just happened to become the target of her latest fixation. He apologized for everything his wife had put me through. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weariness of someone who'd been dealing with this pattern of behavior for a while. I told him honestly that I didn't want anything to do with any of it. I explained that I'd only agreed to meet with him to make it clear that I hadn't wanted any of this to happen and hadn't encouraged it in any way. I wished him the best and left. He just nodded and apologized again as I walked away. I was actually surprised by his reaction. Maybe he wasn't angrier because they'd been through something similar before and he knew it wasn't really about me. It was about her untreated mental illness. I don't know, and I really didn't care to dig deeper. I'd had enough drama to last me a lifetime, and I was just grateful this meeting hadn't turned into another confrontation. So that's where things stood. I was hoping desperately that this was the end of it, that her husband would help her get back into treatment, and that she'd move on with her life and leave me alone.